Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to come to you today. This is Brian Dodd coming with this week's Leadership Moment, and I am very, very excited because this is a special week. This Wednesday, August 26th, will be my 18th anniversary at INJOY Stewardship Solutions. So I'm a big guy on anniversaries and a big guy on work anniversaries, and so I always celebrate this time of year. And working at INJOY Stewardship is just a great blessing in my life, and I've just been thrilled and honored to celebrate 18 years there. So if you're not familiar with INJOY Stewardship, it was an organization founded by John Maxwell, currently owned by my great friend Joe Sangel. And the thing about John Maxwell, and what I want to talk to you about today, is the number one leadership lesson I learned from John Maxwell. So John owned the company from 2002, or actually he founded it in 1992, but I came on board in 2002, and then he sold the organization in 2008. So I had a privilege of working for John for 6 years, and I learned a lot about leadership, but there's one thing that really stands out to me about John. So I want to give you a little background as well. John Maxwell, I cut my teeth as a youth minister. This would have been back in 1989. And my boss at the time, his name is Mark Marshall. He was the senior pastor at our church. He gave me this book to read because he saw that I was working hard and the ministry was showing fruit and the kids loved me and I loved them and everything was going great, but I was going to burn out. So he gave me a book called Developing the Leaders Around You by John Maxwell. Matter of fact, I've actually got that book, and it is right here on this shelf. This is the exact book that Mark gave me back in 1989. And so I began to read it. And of course, you know John's content. It's very easily consumable. So I got through the book real fast. It's very practical. I was using it. It was showing fruit in my life, showing fruit in the ministry. So John kept giving me more and more John Maxwell material. Obviously, that included back then the Enjoy Life Club cassette tapes. And so I would listen to John on the way to and from work. And John became my spiritual hero. And so through a series of miraculous events in August of 2002, I had the privilege to go to work for one of his organizations. And during those 6 years, those were just 6 unbelievable years in my life. I just loved my time working for John. And I did. I learned a lot about leadership. I learned about communication. I learned about writing. I learned about organization. I learned about delegation and hiring and, talent acquisition and how to invest in those people and empower them and trust them. I learned a lot working for John. But there's one thing above all else that I learned from my time with John Maxwell. And I want to say this before I give that point. The greatest compliment I could ever give John Maxwell was he was my spiritual hero before I started working for him, and he's still my spiritual hero today. And many of you will understand what I mean by that statement. Because when you get to see behind the curtain and you get to spend time with Dr. Maxwell on the road and you get to see Dr. Maxwell coming into the office and interacting with people and see Dr. Maxwell in, I'll call it high pressure meetings and things of that nature, and see him as hard decisions need to be made. As you begin to see your spiritual hero or anyone you admire in that kind of environment, it's easy to, number one, they come off the perch, and you can become very cynical. And my time with John did not make me cynical at all. In fact, it made me more passionate about leadership than when I actually wanted to start going to work there. And so I say all that to say this. The number one leadership principle I learned from John Maxwell was not about writing, was not about speaking, was not about communicating, was not about building a team. The number one thing I learned from John was this: how much God blesses a generous life. I have never met a man more generous than John Maxwell. And so you sit there, and I'll never forget, I was at the First Baptist Jacksonville Pastors Conference. and I was teaching a breakout session. And I'll never forget it. I stand up, I gave my introduction of who I was and who I worked for, and there was this older gentleman seated in the room, and he goes, I didn't know this was a thing put on by something John Maxwell owns. He makes too much money. I'm going to leave. I got to be honest with you. This state of carnality came over me at that moment. And I said, sir, can I ask you a question? I mean, if you want to leave, you're obviously welcome to leave. I mean, we're in a packed room. I said, but I want to ask you a question. I said, do you know how much John Maxwell gives away? And he goes, well, no, I don't. I said, do you believe the principle taught in Malachi chapter 3 that you can't outgive God? Well, yeah, I do. And I said, well, before you talk about how much anyone makes, you may want to first ask how much are they giving away and have an answer to that question. Because if you truly believe you can't outgive God, then what does that life look like compounded over time? And I said, do you know what it looks like? And I said, I've never met a man more generous than John Maxwell. So if you can't outgive God, what does that look like? Well, it looks like every book's a bestseller. You know, it looks like someone who attracts talent, who really knows how to multiply resources and advance mission and vision and make organizations and companies and ministries successful. And then you begin, that attracts more leaders and more leaders and more people like that. And then John's continually generous and generous and generous, and you can't outgive God, and you compound that over 25 years, and that looks like John Maxwell. Well, I wish I could say that the guy stayed and it was just, you know, a wonderful kumbaya moment and things like that, but he didn't. He left, but the rest of the people in the room certainly got the picture. And I've just seen John both in my personal life, I've seen him in public, I've seen him in lines at airports and things of that nature, be extraordinarily generous at a level I've never seen. And God has allowed me to work for some unbelievably generous human beings. My current owner, Joe Sangle, and our minority owner, Ken Fryer, would also be in the top 3 of the most generous people I've ever met. But when you sit there and you ask me, what is the number one thing I learned from John Maxwell? It's how much God blesses a generous life. So here's my challenge to you today, who's watching, utilizing John as the example. If you're not as blessed as you want to be in your life, just in any area, financially, relationally, organizationally, just some area, emotionally, some area in your life, if you're not blessed at the level you want to be blessed at, if your life is not overflowing in that area, the number one thing I would tell you is to be generous in that particular area and then watch what God does. So, like I said, I love John Maxwell. John is still my spiritual hero. If John Maxwell asked me to do anything, the answer is yes. I don't even know what the question is, but the answer is yes. There's nothing I wouldn't do for him and Linda Eggers and Mark Cole and Chad Johnson and Jason Stoughton and everybody else that's part of the John Maxwell team. I love them all dearly. And it's just been an honor talking about my spiritual hero, the guy that I wanted to work for, the guy that 18 years ago this week, God granted me the unbelievable privilege of serving on his team. And it's an honor to talk about him today and talk about what he's done in my life. And I hope the lessons and the principles from his life, you utilize them in yours. And if you've not gotten his recent book yet, The Leader's Greatest Return, stop what you're doing, turn this off, go to Amazon, The Leader's Greatest Return by John Maxwell. It's his best book since the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Hey, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to serve you. I hope the investment John Maxwell's made in me from leadership content that's now coming to you. Obviously, it's just overflow of John's investment in me. And I thank you so much. Hope you have a great week. God bless. See you next week.